Outside the mill, Charles's laughter cut through the cold morning air. Workers paused to listen.
Sawdust for walls. You'll be living in a pile of kindling, Stephen.
It's the same trick they use in ice houses. Dead air doesn't move heat.
Ice houses keep cold in, you fool. That's not the same.
The workers guffawed, slapping their knees. Charles wiped a tear from his eye. Stephen's jaw tightened, but he stood his ground. By evening, he was back at his half-built cabin, nailing double walls alone.
Ice houses stay cold because sawdust traps air. Same works for warmth.
He poured sawdust into the cavity, packing it down firmly. His dog watched from the doorway. In the general store, the story spread. Eli shook his head. Poor fool. Charles leaned back, smug. He'll learn when he freezes. But Stephen didn't answer the jeers. He just kept building, one board at a time, while the dog rested its head on a timber. Over the next week, the double walls rose. Stephen worked from dawn until the lanterns burned low, his only company the dog.
Every inch of sawdust traps a pocket of air. That air is what fights the cold, not the wood.
He filled the cavities slowly, tamping the sawdust with a broken axe handle. No gaps, not even a crack.
They laugh, but they don't understand that still air is the best insulator.
From the mill road, Charles watched the cabin take shape. He spat into the snow.
Look at that fool. He's building a coffin with fire hazards.
The day the last board went up, Stephen stood back. The cabin was small, but the walls were thick.
3 feet of sawdust packed tight. If it kept ice cold in August, it'll keep heat in come winter.
That evening, a cold snap hit. Frost spread on windows across town, but Stephen's cabin sat dark and silent. The test was coming. Stephen built a small fire, and the dog whimpered as the wind picked up outside. By morning, the fire had burned to embers, but the cabin held its heat. Stephen woke to warm air on his face.
A quarter quart of wood for a whole night, and the fire barely needed tending.
Outside, the frost was thick on every pane except his own. The dog whimpered by the door, wanting out into the snow.
You sure you want to go out there? All right. But don't come crying when your paws freeze.
He opened the door to a world of white. A neighbor across the way was splitting wood, his breath steaming. Around town, the talk was of how much firewood folks were burning. Stephen bought coffee and listened.
How you faring, Stephen? My place won't warm up for nothing. I've gone through a cord in 2 days.
I manage. Just a small fire. Guess I am lucky.
Charles, however, was counting receipts. The cold was good for business, and every thick chimney told him people were paying his prices.
Let them think it's luck. The real cold hasn't even started yet.
At the mill office, Charles reviewed the ledgers. Stephen's name appeared once, for nails. Nothing else.
He's burning no firewood. That cabin should be an icebox by now.
Charles stepped outside and studied the chimneys. Every house but Stephen's belched smoke. His was a thin wisp.
That fool's walls must be holding heat. If word gets out, I lose the firewood trade.
That afternoon, Charles raised the price of firewood. A sign at the mill now read, "Demand surcharge, $2 extra per cord."
Coldest winter in years coming. Better stock up before it's all gone.
But in the evenings, Charles found himself staring at the sawdust piles, the same waste Stephen used for free.
If the fool is right, I am sitting on a gold mine of insulation. Maybe I can sell it.
A trapper came through town, predicting the worst freeze in decades. The sky had that pale iron look. Stephen banked his fire early. Whatever was coming, the sawdust would have to prove itself. By midnight, the temperature dropped to 20 below. Single-wall cabins groaned as frost crept inside the walls. Inside Eli's cabin, his wife pressed their daughter against her chest. The child's cough was dry and tight.
I've been feeding this stove all night, and it's still freezing. She can't hardly breathe.
Across the road, Stephen's cabin held toasty at 55 degrees. The dog slept on the hearth like it was Sunday.
They must be burning 2 cords a day to keep the frost back, and still the cold seeps in.
By noon, the street was empty. A few men stopped to stare at Stephen's thin chimney smoke, but said nothing.
How's he doing it? I am buying double the wood for half the heat. Something ain't right.
Charles stood at the mill window. The talk was turning from mockery to curiosity. That was more dangerous. 2 days later, the child's cough turned wet. Eli's wife dared not move her from the hearth.
Folks are suffering. I've got the answer right here, packed in these walls. But if I say anything, Charles won't stand it.
The knock came hard at midnight. When Stephen opened the door, Eli stood frozen, his daughter bundled against his chest, her small breath puffing white in the lamplight.
She's been coughing all night, Stephen. Your cabin's the only warm one. I'll pay whatever you ask. Just tell me how.
He's not asking for charity. He's asking for the trick. If I send him away, I am as bad as Charles.
Stephen's jaw tightened. He stepped aside, letting them into the steady warmth.
It's sawdust. The mill's sawdust. Pack it tight in a double wall, and the dead air holds the heat.
Sawdust. That's it? How do you pack it?
Stephen grabbed his coat and a bucket. I'll show you, but not a word to Charles. He'll ruin it.
We'll do it after sundown. I've got a lantern and a strong back.
By the time the moon rose, they were prying boards off Eli's western wall, the dog watching from the corner.
Stack the boards tight. Pour the sawdust slow and tamp it like you mean it. No gaps, no cracks. Every inch you pack is an inch of winter you won't feel.
In his office, Charles paced. Stephen's thin chimney smoke was a problem that wouldn't go away. He had to act.
Order the men to bag every pile of sawdust. From tonight on, nobody touches it without my say.
That night, under flickering lanterns, the mill hands shoveled sawdust into burlap sacks, stacking them high.
Sawdust walls. They're nothing but fire traps. One stray spark and your whole house turns into a stove.
The rumor spread like a cold draft. Before noon, every hearthside conversation turned to the danger.
Firewood is now $10 a cord. That's the cost of staying warm, folks. Pay up or freeze.
Desperate families counted coins with frozen fingers. Their firewood piles shrank as fast as their savings.
Let them burn through their money. When they're broke, I'll sell the sawdust back at a premium.
The town splintered. Some cowered from imagined fires, others hoarded wood. Charles counted his growing profits. Yet outside his window, the northern sky had hardened into black iron. Winter was about to answer. Inside Eli's cabin, the air was so cold their breath hung like fog. Lantern light flickered on the bare studs where the inner wall had been.
Nail it here, Eli. Tight. We'll fill the cavity once the framing's up.
Eli's wife handed them hot coffee, her hands trembling from cold and hope. The child watched from a blanket pile.
Eli drove the nails, his swings echoing in the silent night. How much sawdust do we need?
About 3 feet packed tight. No air gaps. It's the gaps that kill the warmth.
Then came the sawdust, bucket after bucket. They tamped it with a broken broom handle, forcing it into every corner. Gray light began to seep through the frosty windows. They had worked all night. The wall was almost finished.
Stephen glanced out. The sky was heavy, promising snow. This has to hold. For her.
Eli hammered the last nail. The cavity was filled, the wall sealed. The first sawdust-insulated wall outside Stephen's cabin was done. They lit the stove. Now they would wait. The real test had begun. That night, the mercury dropped further still. In Eli's main room, frost formed on the walls like white moss. But in the sawdust-insulated room, the stove ticked softly. Eli's daughter slept, her face peaceful, her cough silent.
Stephen, it's actually warm. The frost stops exactly at the edge of the new wall.
Don't speak it yet. Charles will hear, and he'll find a way to take it from you.
But I can't let my brother freeze. He's got little ones, too.
That evening, Eli broke his promise. He pulled his brother-in-law aside at the woodpile, voice low.
The sawdust works. My little girl slept through the night. You have to see it.
By the next evening, 3 men huddled in Stephen's cabin. The secret was swelling, and Stephen knew it could not stay hidden much longer.
One more house. We'll do yours after dark. No talking, no lanterns visible from the road.
The secret was no longer his alone, and somewhere in the mill, Charles was counting his final bags of profit. By morning, Charles stood behind a stall at the general store. Burlap sacks were stacked high, each hand stamped with the words premium insulation.
Safe, kiln-dried insulation. $2 a bag. Keeps the cold out and won't burn your house down.
The townspeople shuffled closer, some clutching coins, others rubbing frostbitten hands. Fear and hope warred in their faces. Stephen pushed through the crowd, eyes fixed on the sacks. He knew that sawdust. He'd been shoveling it for weeks.
It's the same sawdust from the mill floor. You are charging people for waste.
But mine's treated. Kiln-dried for safety. Your walls are a fire trap waiting to ignite.
A few families glanced at Stephen, then back at the sacks. The rumor Charles had planted months ago bloomed into fear. One man stepped forward and counted coins into Charles's palm. Another followed. Desperate hands grabbed the heavy sacks. Stephen's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Charles was selling their own mill waste back to them, wrapped in lies.
If they won't listen, I'll have to show them. One house at a time, no matter what Charles does.
The next morning, a hand-painted notice appeared on the mill office door. Charles's big letters practically shouted, "Use of unapproved insulation materials within town limits is prohibited. Violators will be fined." That night, 3 more families crept to Stephen's door. Their coin purses were empty, but their need was plain.
I am not a business. I don't want your money. I want you warm.
By midnight, Stephen led a silent crew of 8 through the snow. They carried sawdust in feed sacks, moving from house to house. From the mill window, Charles watched a lantern bob between the cabins. His fists whitened on the sill. 4 cabins got their first double wall that night. The sawdust was free, and the men refused to stop.
They're ignoring my notice. I'll have to bring the law down on that fool.
Charles can fine us all he wants. Frostbite doesn't wait for legal approval.
The next night, 8 more men showed up. Stephen's secret army had doubled, and the mill's sawdust pile shrank further. 3 days later, the barometer fell so fast the needle quivered. The air turned unnatural still. By noon, even the birds had vanished. Old trappers tightened their scarves and checked their fuel.
It's just another cold snap. Buy my insulation, and you'll sleep like a baby.
Eli, this storm is different. Make sure your double walls are packed tight. Don't spare the sawdust.
Stephen walked his own perimeter, feeling for drafts. He added more sawdust where the walls met the joists. At dusk, the wind hit. A low, grinding roar that made the trees groan. The first flakes weren't delicate. They were hard pellets that stung faces. Then the world went white.
Nothing but snow. My mill has stood through worse. Buy another bag if you are scared.
This is the one the trapper warned about. The sawdust will prove itself tonight.
Within an hour, the town vanished beneath a howling white shroud. The test had begun. The wind screamed at 40 below, a sound like tearing metal. The temperature was now a weapon. Inside his large frame house, Charles fed the hearth every 15 minutes. But the walls themselves radiated cold. His breath fogged inside his own parlor. The window panes bloomed with ice on the inside.
I paid good money for insulation. Why is this house an ice pit?
He staggered to a corner and slid open one of his own stamped sacks. Plain, untreated sawdust spilled out.
No kiln, no treatment, just mill waste. My own lie, staring back at me.
A seam between the window frame and wall suddenly gaped, and a needle-thin jet of sub-zero air sliced into the room. Charles shoved his heavy coat into the crack, his fingers already going numb. The wind pushed back.
It's the same stuff Stephen used, but he packed it in walls. I just sold it to them loose.
Outside, the blizzard tightened its grip. Charles sank to his knees by the meager fire, a man whose greed had left him defenseless. Stephen pulled his scarf tight and opened the door. Eli and 4 men stood in the blinding white. The dog pressed close. They found the first family huddled in a corner of a single-wall cabin, the roof groaning, the walls weeping frost.
Get the children to my cabin first. Eli, bring the sawdust. We'll seal this corner now.
They carried the mother and her infant through the gale. Her husband stumbled behind, numb hands clinging to Stephen's coat. Outside the failing cabin, Stephen and Eli worked with frozen fingers, stuffing sawdust-soaked rags into the largest cracks. Through the frost on his own window, Charles watched the lanterns move. He heard the shouts, the crying, the hammering.
They're out there, saving people with my sawdust, and I am in here freezing with my lies.
Inside Stephen's cabin, the rescued child coughed, then breathed easily. The warmest air in town filled the small room. The mother clutched Stephen's arm, tears freezing on her cheeks. Her words were lost in sobs, but he understood.
We're not done. There are more cabins failing, but first, I saw a flicker in Charles' window. He's in trouble too.
Inside his house, Charles slumped against the hearthstones. The fire had shrunk to weak blue flames. He could no longer feel his own hands.
If I don't act, I'll be found frozen tomorrow. Pride won't warm a single breath.
With trembling, numb fingers, he struck a match and lit the lantern that sat on the window ledge, the prearranged signal.
There, let them see it. I shouldn't have, but let them see.
Across the mill yard, Stephen stopped. A single golden flicker wobbled in Charles's window, fighting the whiteout.
That's the distress signal. But it's Charles, Stephen. After everything he's done?
He mocked my walls. He sold lies. But he's still a man, freezing alone. We go. Bring the sawdust and boards. He's not dying on my conscience.
Stephen turned toward the light, pulling a feed sack from his shoulder. Eli spat into the snow, then followed. The lantern flickered, small and desperate, as the two men pushed through the storm toward the house of their worst enemy. Stephen pounded on the door. It swung open, and Charles stumbled backward into the frozen dark. Stephen swept past him, boards under one arm, sawdust sack in the other. He spoke without turning.
Point out the worst drafts. We'll seal the main room first.
Eli began hammering boards across the largest window. Stephen tore open the sawdust sack and packed it deep into the frame. Charles huddled by the hearth, teeth chattering so hard he couldn't form words. His eyes were fixed on Stephen's hands. They plugged the last crack. Within minutes, the fire's warmth stopped being sucked straight into the night. Stephen poured the last of the sawdust, then turned. Charles was on his feet now, swaying but alive.
I was wrong about the sawdust, about you.
Stephen just nodded once, his expression unreadable. Then he handed Charles the empty sack. Outside, the storm howled on, but inside Charles's house, for the first time in hours, the temperature began to rise. By dawn, the wind had fallen to a whisper. A pale sun climbed over the endless white. The storm was done. Doors cracked open. Frostbitten faces peered out, then stumbled into the light to check on neighbors. Every cabin with Stephen's sawdust walls stood warm. Those without were silent, their inner walls bearded with frost.
Not a single sawdust wall failed. Every one of ours is warm.
At Charles's house, the chimney smoked peacefully, but the yard was littered with empty premium insulation sacks. A murmur spread through the gathering crowd. The truth was no longer hidden in the walls.
The ice house trick never failed. Still air trapped in sawdust, just like I told them.
A woman called out. It was the sawdust. The mill waste saved us. Others took up the cry. Charles appeared on his porch, wrapped in blankets. His face was hollow. No one rushed to thank him. The evidence was inescapable. Winter had judged, and Stephen's scrap walls had won. An hour later, Charles dragged his remaining sacks to the mill yard. He chalked a new sign. Half price one a bag.
Same product as before. The storm's over. Now's the time to insulate.
No one stopped. People walked past him, some shaking their heads. A woman spat on the ground. A mill hand named Owen stepped forward with a plank and paint. He nailed it above the sawdust pile. Free sawdust. Take what you need. A roar went up from the crowd. Men and women rushed forward with buckets and feed sacks. Charles stumbled backward, and then they lifted Stephen onto their shoulders. Not as a hero, but as proof that the right idea, shared freely, couldn't be bought.
I never wanted power, just warm walls for everyone. And now they know it's possible.
Charles retreated to his office door. For the first time, the mill didn't answer to him. It answered to the town. The crowd dispersed to fill their walls. The sawdust mounds shrank visibly. Bucket by bucket, Charles looked back once, then slipped inside. His reign was over. The sawdust now belonged to everyone. The next morning, Stephen set up a simple demonstration outside the general store. A bucket of sawdust beside a wooden frame.
Build a double wall. Pack the gap with sawdust and you'll stay warm all winter.
Families gathered, asking questions. Eli translated Stephen's calm instructions into plain steps for the nervous ones. By noon, the mill road echoed with hammers. Men and women worked side by side, nailing double walls. Children toted small buckets of sawdust, mimicking the adults. Their laughter filled the gaps between the blows.
Pack it tight like you are stuffing a pillow. The air's got to be trapped.
From the mill office window, Charles watched. A shadow behind the frost, never stepping into the light.
They're using my sawdust, and I am the fool who tried to sell it.
But no one glanced his way. The town had found a new rhythm, and it did not include him. By sunset, the sawdust piles had halved again. Warmth rose from every cabin, and Stephen finally rested. Spring meltwater dripped from the eaves. The mill's sawdust pile was no more than a stained patch on the ground. Stephen walked the mill road, his dog at his side. From every chimney, a thin curl of smoke rose steady. He paused on the low hill overlooking town. The sound of hammers had given way to children's laughter.
The ice house secret never made me rich, but no family in this town will freeze again.
Every cabin he could see now had its double wall. The sawdust that had been worthless was now priceless and still free. They called his walls a pile of mill scraps. But after 40 below, not a single draft had gotten in. The sun dipped low, painting the chimney smoke gold. The mill road looked like any other, except every home was warm. He turned for home, the dog trotting ahead. The future would bring more winters. This town was ready. The sawdust piles were gone, transformed into walls that held the cold at bay. All because one man shared what others threw away. Final shot, row of warm cabins, smoke rising, sunset, winter had lost. That evening, Stephen sat by his hearth, the fire low and steady. The dog snored softly on the rug. He thought back on the frozen nights, the sawdust, the faces. All that remained now was a quiet joy. A knock broke the silence. The dog's ears pricked up, its tail thumping once against the floor.
From the missus. For everything.
Stephen took the mason jar, its glass still cool. He nodded, touched his chest, and smiled faintly.
Tell her I am grateful. More than I can say.
Eli tipped his hat once and slipped back into the dark. The door clicked shut. Stephen looked at the preserves, then at the sleeping dog. The fire popped, and a small smile broke through. He set the jar on the mantel, beside the empty sawdust bucket. His work was done. The dog settled back into sleep. Through the window, chimney smoke drifted peacefully into the starry sky. And so the ice house secret never made Stephen rich. But after that winter, no draft ever slipped through his walls again. The mill waste that Charles called worthless had proven priceless, and the man who shared it for free, he slept soundly every cold night, knowing others did too. The sawdust mounds shrank with the passing months, but the warmth in the walls never faded. In time, the story became a legend passed through the valley. They called his method a trick from the ice houses, and it worked for the coldest days. As dusk settled over the mill road, every chimney still sent up smoke. Not desperate, black clouds of burning money, but gentle wisps of a town at peace. Winter had come with all its fury, but the sawdust walls held, and they would hold forevermore.